Hey everyone, hopefully you're having a good day. My name's Andy. My channel's Finding Value. Today we're going to go over an overall market update. We're seeing the 10-year yield go higher. We're seeing the dollar get a little bit weaker. And I just wanted to look kind of at the side view mirrors to see what's going on with some of the other sectors. With higher yields, assets or sectors that are very inflation rate sensitive, we should see those start to pull back. Something like the S&P 500 might pull back, the Nasdaq and tech stocks might pull back, and some of these overall companies, they've really been pushed up to into the stratosphere, so to speak, in terms of valuations, and that was driven, in my opinion, by low interest rates. So people can't get a return in bonds, and what they do is they go what's called a risk on environment, where they move in their money into the stock market, tech companies, and push the valuations up because they can't get a return in bonds. And at the end of this, when interest rates go up, bonds will actually go down. And I think it will put pressure on stocks as well to head lower. And I always said this on the channel, I don't know what it's necessarily going to look like for the interaction of the entire market with the stock market pullback and the impact that might have on commodities in the short term when the interest rate goes up, and it's going to put pressure on these sectors to go down. So you might see a little bit of pressure coming down on weighing in on the commodity sector for a short term while money starts to rotate around. Is this the point where we start to see a large rotation of money? That's really difficult to say, and I don't want to try to pinpoint it. What I try to do is identify where the value is in the market, invest in that value, and if I have to ride through some bumps, that's okay because, well, one, if we've been invested since 2020 and 2021, we should be up substantially in our accounts, and we're going to ride, at least what I'm going to do is ride through it. So if it does pull us back a little bit because of how much leverage is in the system, and there's going to be a kind of a deleveraging, we got to back out of the, some of these things, it may pull us back some for a while. The way that I view it is it's a buying opportunity in commodities. Obviously, it's not a buying opportunity in the overall stock market if it's at that point yet. And I don't know exactly when interest rates are going to be at the break point. I would think that it's probably pretty low, and it's probably at a rate that's higher than the dividend yield payment on stocks, kind of that average. So it might be 1.5%, 2%. It's really hard to say. I don't have that answer for you. I wish I did. And I wish I had that answer for myself. But we did see a pullback in the overall market today. And I'm going to go over some companies that I just watch in general and let you guys know kind of what's going on. We had a pretty large sell-off today in the S&P 500 index. Is this the beginning of a move lower? I don't necessarily know, guys. But I mean, to me, I thought some of this was looking quite toppy even in here, and it pushed a little bit higher. It just kept pushing higher. And with rates going up, it's going to be a headwind for these investments. This one here is the US Composite Index, and this thing definitely looks like it's rolling over. Usually what happens is you start with a bearish engulfing or something like that at the peak. You've got one here, you've got one here, and then the buying pressure kind of runs out here. You get hit on your head, and then you start seeing large selling pressure days throughout here, which we're seeing. We're seeing that large selling pressure everywhere on this side. It's becoming more normal. That is how a top begins. Is this the top? I mean, it sure looks like it's trying to put in a top to me. And usually what happens is your volatility goes up and your selling, opening and closing of these goes down dramatic throughout these. And we're seeing one here, here, here. We're seeing another big down day here, and they're bigger than all the up days. That is what it looks like. And I wish I could see volume here. For some reason, I'm not seeing volume. But if your volume's kicking up at the same time, you're probably getting close to a peak. So this is looking quite toppy for the US Composite Index here. Looking at Chipotle, I mean, this thing looks like it's ready to go lower. It's not looking like this definitely looks like it's rolling over. We've got a high here. Why does it always default there? We have a high here, a lower high, a lower high. And then if we back out, I mean, this doesn't look like something that I would want to be buying. And it looks like to me that we're basically kind of breaking out through here. And we broke to the downside, did a back test here, and then we're breaking down to head lower. That's kind of what I'm seeing here play out. Something on the lines of this, somewhere in there. So could this be breaking down? It very well could. And we might get dragged down with it in the short term in the commodity complex as well. Here's Apple. And guys, I'm not in the business of calling tops. I'm not trying to. I'm not the legend here. But bearish piercing, bearish engulfing, bearish piercing. The down days are starting to get larger. I'm looking at the volume here, and yeah, it's not looking good. This could be a potential top, and I'm not, again, guys, I'm not in the game for calling tops. I'd rather just get my value where I know where it's at. Basically, cost average in and let this play out, and not try to time it that perfect. But we're getting some stronger selling pressure. Amazon, I drew in this kind of pattern here, and it looks like we're trying to break to the downside here. We'll see if it holds. We'll continue to monitor it, but if this thing breaks to the downside, it looks like we could be putting in a top. And I'm looking at this from a paradigm that this is going to be topping. So I am looking at it from a jaded viewpoint, because where I'm seeing interest rates go up, and these are highly sensitive to interest rates. Facebook, this doesn't look like it's, I mean, I wouldn't be looking at this, but a high, a lower high, and now we need to see if this can hold down here. If this breaks down below 310 or so and closes below it, I mean, this kind of looks like a topping pattern to me if it closes below. I'm not at that point yet, but it's not looking good with the increasing interest rate environment. But again, I'm not calling a top. I'm making observations here. Whenever you see these large sell-off days like we had today in Google, that's kind of how things start. You start seeing bearish engulfings, and they're big. And then the buyers, they fail to push it up, gets sold off, fails to push up. And then you start seeing more big selling pressure days like we had today on larger volume. There's another larger volume sell-off day here, and another larger volume sell-off day here, and some in here. That's how a topping kind of a topping pattern looks like this when you start getting some big sell-off days. Beidou's looking actually quite good. This one looks good down here, to be honest. But this has big buying pressure and small selling pressure. This looks a lot better than a lot of the other companies. Visa, it's already kind of breaking out of its pattern here. And what it does is it breaks out. It does a return move upward. And then you'll see a top here. And for me, I would be exiting my position. This is the last good time to exit the position, in my opinion. This looks like a topping pattern to me. We've broken the long-term uptrend line. We've come into basically a squeezing up a little bit. We had some strong selling pressure over here. We're starting to see the volume kick up a little bit on this side, selling off. You come on up for a return move, and then it's going to probably dive lower. MasterCard's probably in a similar situation. It's back in the pattern again, almost like it got driven back up. But I would be looking at this from a downward perspective. And I'm just scanning across here for big selling pressure days versus weaker buying pressure. And you'll probably see this thing head lower eventually. The trade desk, yeah, it kind of was like a false move higher. We're starting to see some selling pressure creep in here, bringing this back down to earth. It's probably got high valuations. I don't know what the valuations are, but yeah, I big sell off today. Roku's getting smashed. What it's doing here is it's smashing below its lower support line out of its channel here, and it's getting smashed quite hard. The volume was kicking up a little bit. Let's see if this thing holds down here and starts to break down for Roku. And then we've got other ones that I would say are going to probably be a little bit stronger and aren't part of this. But that's what I've got for today. That's the overall market that I'm looking at. We could be topping out. And again, I don't want to get in the business of trying to call tops. That's where you get your head cut off, because you'll call a couple of false tops. About a year ago, I was looking for a topping pattern in this. And I said, well, when rates start to increase, we're going to start to see these things kind of roll over. Now, I think that people were in there, or the Federal Reserve was in there buying some of these things up, and now they're not buying them as much. With interest rates going up, they were probably controlling interest rates as well. It's hard to say, but I think a lot of this stuff's probably going to pull back on them. So I am looking for a pullback in the overall market. It could have an impact on our commodity stocks. So difficult to say how this all plays out. Difficult to say that it's a one-to-one relationship. But if things start to sell off, I do think that we could see a commodity have an impact on commodities and have it kind of sell off if these things are getting hit quite hard. So just wanted to touch on that. Make sure you guys are watching, stuff outside of the commodity sector. It does look like it's getting a little bit toppy. That's kind of what I'm seeing. And I think it will have an impact on our commodity stocks for a good a good while. As long as it's pulling back and selling off, I think it's going to have an impact on our stuff. If you guys like this content, give me a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And thank you for listening. This is Finding Value.